Okay, so here you can see an elite performer performing the glide technique for shot put. If we look at the first phase, which is the preliminary position, you can see that he's very straight on. The athlete is square nicely over his base, keeping centre of mass in the middle. You can also see that he's looking over this way, and you can just make out that the shot is going to be kept just there on the other side of his neck, tucked right into his neck, on his fingertips rather than his palm. Resting the shot on your fingertips will allow for an easy release with minimal resistance. You can also see that the arm is nice and high and straight. This is ready to be lowered down in order to generate torque. The athlete then moves on into the next phase, which is known as the T position. You can see that from his head to his hips to his back foot, it's near enough completely straight. You can see it even goes slightly higher. The athlete is looking down and back because he wants to keep his shoulders just there, facing this way for as long as possible. This will allow him later on in the glide technique to generate a much greater torque and therefore a more powerful throw. You can also see that his arm here is lowered, and that's basically there ready, so when he does his kickback in the next phase, he can use that arm to generate as much torque as he can, generating some rotational force and really having a powerful throw. The athlete then enters the next phase, which is known as the crouch phase. Just there. You can see that straight away you can see the difference of how tight he is. He's as coiled up as small as he can get. You can see in this curl phase as well, his arm is still dangling low, ready to generate that torque, and he's still looking down and back to keep his shoulders facing the opposite direction for as long as possible. The reason that he is crouched so much in this phase is that although he wants to transfer all his energy and all the force in this direction to throw the shot as far as he can, there's actually a slight need for some vertical force as well. It's argued that the most desirable path, if you look at it from a sagittal axis, is actually an S shape. So it'll actually go down into the curl and then up like that and then release. So you can see this as the athletes move on. He goes down and then gets higher. So he's gone down into the curl and now he's getting higher, and then when he lands into that power position, goes down slightly and then back up. The reason for this S shape and the need for that vertical force is that when he lands in his power position like that, when his foot lands, is that it's all to do with the stretch shortening cycle. So the idea is by going up and making his centre of mass higher and then coming back down, he'll then activate his stretch reflex, where his muscles will powerfully contract involuntarily. That is why the S-shaped path is quite important, and hence why you get so crouched in the crouch phase. The next phase is the shift. This is where the athlete kicks back and his feet land near enough simultaneously. See that the athlete kicks back as powerfully as he can, but the main thing to notice is he's still looking down and this way, and his shoulders are still square as well as still facing the opposite direction. This is just ready for this arm to swing round to generate as much torque as he can, but you want to do that as late as you can as well. It's also important to note that you can see his arm here is actually tucked in now. The reason for that is he's shortening the lever so he can generate much more torque. As you can see, he then swings that arm from here all the way around to generate as much rotational force as he can to get a greater force when throwing that shot that he can throw it horizontally in a linear motion. The next phase is his power position. The first thing to note that his toe is in line with his knee which is in line with his chin. So you can see there's a straight line going up. So he's got all of his weight distributed on this back leg. Having the weight distributed there will mean when he then transfers his weight, which you can see there, onto his front foot, it'll allow a much greater force to be transferred that way. You can also see now his arm is actually starting to come round and rotate through on that power position. Even though he brings his arm through that way, it's still important to note that his shoulders and his head are still facing that way, so he can unwind as late as possible. That late unwind is essential for generating as much torque as possible. You want to store the energy from that torque and release it at the last possible second to show that, to transfer it into that horizontal energy, the linear motion, to throw that shot put as far as you can. The athlete then moves into the lifting phase. You can see there, he then starts to lift. The most important aspect of this phase is you can see he's now rotated his shoulders to face the front. He's done that very last second. You can also see his arm has also, his non-throwing arm, is now whipped round all the way to the other side of him, generating that powerful torque. On that lifting, you can see that he doesn't take his shoulders through first. You actually see there that he takes his knee through before anything else. You can see it starts to rotate. The next thing, once he's done his knee, his hips will then go through and then his shoulders. That causes his bow shape. The importance of this bow shape is huge because all this energy that we've picked up from making our T down into our curl, kicking that powerfully back into this power position, all the energy that we've produced and generated is all stored here in his legs. So now we need to get that energy from his legs all the way up through his body, and then eventually when he comes around it needs to go up through his body, through his arm and out into the shot. Therefore you can see his knees start to then move the energy higher up his body, then his hips, and then finally his shoulders. So the key aspect of the lifting phase is this bowed position. The next phase is the arm strike position. It's a very similar phase to the lifting phase, but it's more focusing on the arm. You can see that through the whole of the technique, he keeps his throwing arm elbow high. So there, it's nice and level with his shoulders, keeps it nice and high. This means when he goes to throw, he can actually push through the shot. If he has his arm low, his elbow low, so it's more down here, when he actually goes to throw the shot, it will cause his arm to buckle and his wrist come under the shot. So you're not actually getting as much force behind, you're going to be going more under like that. So the key aspect for the arm strike position is having that high elbow and pushing directly through the shot. You can see he'll follow that line straight through the shot. The last phase is release. You want a nice high release. The actual optimal angle for release is between 31 and 36 degrees. You can see this athlete from his release is approximately 37, 36, so he's actually got a very good release. What is commonly less talked about with release is actually the rear leg position, so this leg position here. It's argued that the angle in this leg, this rear leg, is actually a significant predictor in the measured distance of the throw. The reason for this is if the athlete has really transferred that energy well up their body, through their knees, through the hips, out through the shoulders and up through the arm and then into the shot, their leg won't have time to fully extend. That's why you see that leg has actually got a slight bend in it. If their leg is fully extended, which you can see eventually there, it just fully extends just about. If their leg fully extends before they release the shot, it's likely that they've not transferred that force quick enough their body, so they're not going to get a very powerful throw. And that's likely to be because their shoulders have rotated too early and have lost that torque. Whereas you can see here, his shoulders come through nice and late, and by the time he's thrown the shot, he hasn't got the time to extend that back leg.